everybody, I'm Alyssa from Untitled Astrology. Today we're going to talk about the astrology of October 5th through 11th. We have a lot of things that we're going to talk about this week, including the full moon in the sign of Aries. So we're going to get into all of that. Before we do, I just want to give you a reminder to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you subscribe, you won't miss any of these weekly videos that we have come out. They come out every Saturday for the week ahead, nor will you miss the weekly videos that we have. Sorry, not the weekly videos, the live meditations that we have. Sunday nights, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I host a live astrological meditation right here on our channel, Meditative Astrology, right here on YouTube. And that is a space where we can come to, we can contemplate the major aspects that are going on. We can look at them in maybe a little bit different way than what we do here on our weekly video. And we can contemplate on those. We can sit in a space of silence or a space of meditation, in a place where we can commune with the energies that are around us. We can connect with the astrology. We can connect with the gods and goddesses that are working with us and that are there to mirror our human interactions that are happening here within our daily lives. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of those, and an invitation to join us for our live meditation Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you follow us or like on Facebook and Instagram, then you won't miss any of the updates, announcements, or any of the other posts that come. If I ever need to change any of the live meditation for any reason, that will go there, as well as our weekly intention that comes out Friday. So we have a nice setup here between Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that hopefully gets you ready for the week in a multitude of ways. Looking at a weekly intention, which is a phrase that is guided by the astrology that is coming up and the energies that are around us. The weekly video where we talk about everything within its entirety as much as we are able to here on this channel. And then the live meditation where it can all come together into a space of connection, in a space of community, in a space of communing with the energies, a space of silence and contemplating and really connecting deeply. So yeah, like, follow, subscribe on all the places, and I hope you join us for our live meditations. So thank you for giving me the space to go ahead and say all of that. And with that being said, we're going to get right into the astrology of the week here. We start out on Sunday, October 5th, with the moon in the sign of Pisces and no major aspects other than some of the lunar aspects that are going on. So we're going to go ahead and just buzz right forward into Monday, October 6th, because this is where we start the action. This is where we have our full moon in the sign of Aries. It comes through 11:46 p.m. Eastern Time, so depending on where you are located in your time zone, it may be later on Monday, or it may actually be coming through really early on Sunday. So Friday, by the time Friday or so, Monday night into Tuesday morning, we have the full moon coming through. But all day Monday, you can look at the full moon here, right? So the full moon in the sign of Aries at 14 degrees. It's ruled by Mars. Mars is in the sign of Scorpio, which is its feminine domicile. So each planet, other than the sun and the moon, rule two signs. Mars's signs are Aries, where the full moon is, and Scorpio, where Mars is sitting currently. If we put up the chart here, if I go ahead and do this, you can see that Mercury has just ingressed into the sign of Scorpio as well. That actually came through earlier on Monday. So not only do we have a full moon in the sign of Aries, but we have Mercury just entering the sign that is also ruled by the ruler of the full moon, and where Mars is co-present in the sign of Scorpio. So we have a big, strong Mars energy here coming through this week. When I think about Mercury in the sign of Scorpio, I think about the fact that it's in a feminine water sign of Mars. And like I said, Mars is sitting right there too. So there is movement, there is separating, there can be frustrations that can feel angsty in the sign of Scorpio, and emotions can swell. Emotions can turn into overwhelm, right? We can, in the sign of Scorpio, we can get really fixated, and we can really be drilling deep down into the details and really wanting to understand and really deep diving into things. So we can even be looking in some of those more hidden spaces, or like the nooks and crannies that we don't always pay attention to, or maybe we don't necessarily want to look in because whatever the reason may be. There's an investigative mindset when Mercury is in the sign of Scorpio. There is deep probing, and there's that emotional connectedness in the sign of Scorpio, right? So this is related to our mind with Mercury being in Scorpio, as well as our ambitions with Mars being there too. overthinking, emotional responses, mental overwhelm. These are some of the things that could be a little bit more difficult. I think about Scorpio and I think about loyalty. I think about something that is so committed to whatever it's committed to until it feels like it's been wronged or feels like it's been deceived. Then it's the opposite end, and it's not you don't want to be necessarily on the other end of that, of Scorpio type energy. So Mercury in Scorpio has this very deep, meditative, there's an intuitive energy in the sign of Scorpio. There's a very real, raw, superficial, avoidant, not wanting to be superficial, wanting to be deep, wanting to be raw, wanting to be authentic, and wanting to just truly express, as well as wanting things to be truly expressed to itself as well here. So you have this deep energy, right? This deep diving, contemplative energy here within the eclipse. Or sorry, not within the eclipse. We've been talking so much about eclipses that I keep thinking about that. So the full moon in the sign of Aries. If we go back to the sign of Aries, where the full moon is taking place, I think about how Saturn has just recently exited this sign just for a short little while. It's going to be back, but it's in the sign of Pisces here. So where has there been some sort of reduced stress or some sort of struggle or sacrifice that has kind of went away for right now, right? So maybe if there's been limitations in the sign of Aries, a sign that is really want to go, 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 maybe within this full moon here, since Saturn has, you know, politely through its retrograde stepped out for a minute, maybe we can really rise up with that individuation that Aries is so good at, that initiation, right? If it feels like we haven't been able to do that, maybe we can go forward with that within this full moon energy here. So individuation, but within the realm of Scorpio at the same time, right? Because we got a lot of Scorpio things that are going on here. So individuation and blazing your own trail, but with an emotional and a mental depth at the same time, right? Something that you are convicted about and you feel very strongly and deeply about, or you're committed or you're loyal, you're passionate about moving forward with here. With this full moon, I'm thinking about self-isolation. I think about that both. It's a Mars thing, I think, right? But Aries and Scorpio, they can both isolate. There can be pros and cons to that. So if we isolate ourselves, we can contemplate, and there can be movement that comes from that. There can be self-empowerment that comes from separating yourself from others, but there can also be a self-sacrifice that comes with that, right? If you are pushing yourself aside, or, you know, condemning yourself, or, you know, sacrificing yourself for whatever reason, or, you know, just feeling like you're not good enough or something like that, then that's not so positive. We might get caught in our own emotional actions in some sort of way, or just caught up in our own emotions with Mars and Mercury, both in the sign of Scorpio. There can be a lot going on in the headspace, and there can kind of be some actions and reactions that play into that too as well. So that ability to start and initiate that bold, courageous action here within the full moon, and again emphasizing that Saturn has stepped out for now, but we'll be coming back here again. So we will have Aries full moons with Saturn in the sign of Aries, but at the moment we're going to take what we can get here, right? So that ability to initiate, to start, to individuate itself, but also not afraid to dig deep down into the shadows, to the unseen, to the hidden. I'm thinking about a lot of power, a lot of strength, a lot of vitality, and a lot of commitment to being bold and to being courageous and rising up within some way. That feels very, very Aries-like, to rise up, but rising up from the depths, right? Thinking about Scorpio. Within modern astrology, I don't necessarily conflate, I don't put rulership on the outer planets, but it's worthwhile to consider that Pluto, the lord of the underworld, according to modern astrology, is the ruler of Scorpio. And you can think of that depth and the correlation between the two, right? Rising up from the depths, rising up from that Plutonian type space and that type energy here. So this full moon has the potential to just be really, really deep, potentially cathartic for some of us, but also very empowering at the same time. However, making sure we are not overpowering others, because when we're empowered, we want to make sure we're not stepping on the toes of of anybody else here, right, at the same time. So yeah, this is our full moon that we have coming through here, and there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of energy. Mercury just stepping into the sign of Scorpio really amps up that Scorpio energy and brings the mental realm and the mental capacity into it. So yeah, it could be intense for many of us, but that's within the nature of the full moon within its own right, because it's an opposition between the sun and the moon, right? It's the height of the lunar cycle, and this lunar cycle started with a solar eclipse in the sign of Virgo. If you go back to my other videos, you will see all of the tense intensity and, you know, the Saturn and Venus being in its fall and all of these other things that have played into the eclipse. It's very tense for very serious, maybe not even tense, but there's a very serious, weighty focus for a lot of people with this eclipse that we just came through here. So yeah, that's the full moon that we start out with in the beginning of the week here. If we go ahead and move forward, we're going to keep talking about Mercury. So as Mercury moves into the sign of Scorpio, it's going to start applying to a square with Pluto, the planet that we just mentioned. Now, we talked about a couple weeks ago about Mars entering the sign of Scorpio and coming through this square to Pluto. Mercury square is going to be similar, but it might be a little bit more mental rather than action driven or something like that. Or it doesn't necessarily have less power, but it might not have, it doesn't have that aggression backing of Mars being the planet itself. However, Mars being in the sign of Scorpio is co-present with it, so it's influencing it. So it's still, there's a whole lot of Scorpio energy here coming through. So Mercury making a square to Pluto, you have that depth from the mental realm, right? That depth of the underworld connecting with the mental sphere. So there can be probing into the depth of the mind. We can talk about the psyche. We can talk about the deeper unconscious spaces that exist within all of us. You can think of those deep unconscious spaces of both the collective as well as the self. Think about the self with Mercury being in the sign of Scorpio and bringing it down to maybe a little bit more central space. But Pluto in the sign of Aquarius has a much more broad collective world view, kind of that 1,000-foot view in the sign of Aquarius here. So the square tells us there's a challenge, right? There's something to come from. So the self and the collective could be at odds with each other here at some point, right? Or there could be a challenge to understand new depths of some sort, right? Exploring things and really getting down into the nitty-gritty details and not shying away from the ones that maybe we don't necessarily want to look at. So that investigative mindset really, really comes through here with the square to Pluto, coming in through this aspect here. So the intensity kind of keeps going through the week here. I think intensity is a good word for this upcoming week here. So yeah, intensity does not necessarily mean bad, right? It just means that it's a little bit different. When we think about something different, that can be a little scary, right? When we're talking about the deep spaces in Scorpio and looking into the nooks and crannies and exploring unexplored things. But there's a lot of power and there's a lot of strength that can come from this overcoming in the sign of Scorpio, as well as with this aspect that we have here with Mercury and Pluto here, right? So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and keep moving forward and keep moving on with the aspects. There's quite a few of them here this week. So we come into Wednesday, we have this nice beneficial aspect that is coming through here. We have Venus making a quick little sextile to Jupiter. These are quick moving, they can be subtle. However, I feel like this one could just really possibly feel good with all of the other intensity. We're just gonna keep going with the word intensity here. That is coming in here. And you know, it's built into the full moon in the applying aspect. So that amplifies it a little bit here too, right? Because the full moon is a height of things, it's a culmination of energy, so that might amplify these other aspects that we have coming through here this week. But this is a beneficial support that is coming through here. This is growth providing, it's a nurturing space to set your optimistic base from here and be able to expand into an understanding that you will be able to provide or to be able to provide for. I'm thinking about Jupiter being in the sign of Cancer, the water emotional sign of the womb, the place of the mother, the place of birth, the place of ancestry and where we've come from. And Venus being in the sign of Virgo, right? A place where she likes to provide, but she likes to provide in a certain way. She likes to provide in a way that is going to have us feeling secure and feeling like we can get through what is coming through as the seasons start to change. If you go back to the solar eclipse videos, we talked a whole lot about the symbolism and the metaphorical meanings of the sign of Virgo. So you can take a look back at that if you want to here. But you know, darkness may be looming. We're talking a lot about darkness. We're talking a lot about intensity, right? We're talking a lot about Mars. We've talked a whole lot about Saturn here lately. So darkness may be looming, but we have the resources that are available to us, right? Virgo is able to rise up in a way that she can resource the things that she needs and she can serve from that place. Jupiter is a place where we can create a solid base, a stable base where we can grow from. So you think about maybe the base of this interaction, or the base of the tree being Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, or the home, or you know, the nest that you've come from. Venus and the sign of Virgo. So if I go to like a nest metaphor here, coming up with that kind of off of the top of my head, so bear with me here. If we think about like the nest, so think about like baby birds in a nest, right? Jupiter in Cancer could be the actual nest where the mom is, and the mom is there and she's sitting on the eggs before the baby birds are hatched, and then she's there caring for the baby birds. The Venus in the sign of Virgo may be the catalyst for the baby bird to jump out of the tree, to be able to find its own way and start learning how to fly. The Venus in Virgo may be the worms that feed the baby bird and, you know, help it grow and help it proliferate, so that way from this strong base it can fly and it can have the resources to meet whatever it finds within the world here. So this is a fun little aspect that comes through the week here that is going to feel very good and feel very beneficial for a lot of us, I think here. Yeah, so that's what we have Wednesday. If we go ahead and move forward into Thursday, we don't have any major aspects that are going here. We don't even have any major lunar aspects. When I look at the lunar aspects, I look at the conjunctions, the squares, and the oppositions. When I look at the planetary aspects here, still looking at the major aspects, but including the sextile and the trine. So the conjunction, the opposition, the squares, the sextiles, and the trine, because those are the loudest aspects from my experience, and there are other minor aspects that can be playing out there. So if you're looking at anything else that is happening this week, that is why we are not necessarily talking about those here. So yeah, we're gonna take that Taurus moon from Thursday right into Friday. No major aspects here. Moon in the sign of Gemini. You can see the couple aspects that we have. I like to list out the lunar aspects here for you during the week, so that way you have them if they are helpful for you. And then on Saturday, October 11th, we have our last aspect of this week here. So last week we talked a little bit about Venus-Saturn as Venus came across the South Node. Venus is going to oppose Saturn here on Saturday, October 11th, applying to that eclipse point. We talked about last week Venus being within its fall. Venus likes to unify things. It likes to bring things together. Virgo likes to distribute. It likes to compartmentalize, it likes to rationalize, and it likes to separate things rationally. It's a Mercury-ruled sign, right? So that's why it's a place that Venus doesn't necessarily like. It's in its fall there because separating things is not necessarily a Venusian thing to do. If we look at the ruler of Virgo during this aspect, Venus and Saturn, Mercury is in the sign of Scorpio, which is considered Venus's detriment. So it kind of feels like Venus doesn't have a whole lot of support right now. That doesn't necessarily mean that Venus can't come up with anything good, but Venus is giving this moment here where she needs to have a little bit of a serious conversation of some kind, and she might want to reach a little bit deeper than what she normally likes to do. Sometimes, you know, in the sign of Virgo, you could, or not Virgo, the sign of Libra, Venus's air sign, sometimes you get stereotypes of like superficial or wishy-washy or unable to make a decision. That's really because it wants unity. It wants all parts to be happy. When we talk about Virgo, when we talk about Scorpio, these are signs where we're tipping towards the dark half of the year where we don't necessarily we know that that's not always possible. That's not always what we can do here, right? So Venus opposing Saturn is always a moment to reach into some sort of maturity. It's a moment and an invitation to allow something to reach itself to the next level. And a lot of times that comes with hard work. A lot of times that comes with looking at difficult things. A lot of times that comes with separating different things and, you know, maybe some sort of tense or restricted relations of some kind. But wondering about an opportunity to resolve challenges, but not without that necessary deep probing, right? So it might be a little bit of a tense moment. However, what can come from it? Saturn is a planet that can bring us long-term structures. Whatever builds within Saturn can last a lifetime, right? It can last for an eternity. Venus likes to build things. So we might be able to work towards building some sort of foundation or structure, but there's some work that goes into it. And we can probably start to notice at this point that it's not something that's going to happen overnight, right? There's a lot of effort, there's a lot of sacrifice, there's a lot of service that needs to go in here. We have the emotional realm, we have the rational realm here. When I think about the rational realm, I think about Virgo and I think about Mercury. However, Mercury is in, the ruler of Virgo, is in an emotional place. It's in a water sign of Scorpio. Venus has a lot of emotional components to it within its own significations. And then Saturn is in the sign of Pisces, which is another water sign. And we'd already talked about how it's the exaltation of Venus. So there's a lot of the emotional energy with a little bit of the rational energy mixing in there too. Water and earth can complement each other. So they're able to come together. However, there are differences there too, right? So finding that balance, there's an invitation here to balance that emotional and that rational energy and look at these deeper components of what we are trying to create. I think this Venus-Saturn opposition here still definitely has something to do with the solar eclipse. That solar eclipse started the lunar cycle that this full moon is coming into. Eclipse cycles, they are much longer than just the lunar cycle, right? We have longevities of 6 months, we have longevities of 9 and 18 years if we look at the positions of the nodes of the moon. So there's history, there's karmic history, and there's karma that is coming forward into our lives here too. So yeah, what type of things where have you been trying to find some Venusian flair, but you know that there's some work, you know that there's some heaviness that is around it, you know that there are some other things that you have to consider. Venus can't just go do the Venus thing that she likes to do here. More intensity for this week, right? But that's not bad. These, I think good and bad are relative terms for the most part. And these are, I think we're giving a lot of points to grow from this week. You know, challenges to overcome, things like that. Not necessarily easy, but places where we can look back and say, you know, look where I was and now look where I am, right? Like that could be something that we could say in the future here. So yeah, there's some interesting things that are going on this week. I hope everybody has a very lovely, lovely week amongst all of this. And I hope you join us for our live meditation Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be talking about all of these things and we will be contemplating on them as well. When you're thinking about the intensity of this week, don't forget about the Venus-Jupiter sextile that comes through here, because that's a little extra, that might be a little level of hope for Venus, right? So if you think about that baby bird that is in the nest and it flies out to go elsewhere, going back to that metaphor, like that's got to be really scary, right? Like to, I don't know, jump out of the nest, fall out of the nest, whatever. Think about when you start going out of something, like trying to do something that is brand new to you. Like it can be scary. We don't necessarily know what we're doing. We might feel like we're out on our own, but there's growth that comes from it. It does not take that bird long to learn how to fly. Kind of like that, right? That's the type of energy that I see coming through here. So I hope that is encouraging. I hope that, yeah, I just hope everybody has a great week, and I hope to see you back here next week as well as our live meditation. So everybody take care, have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.